In this tutorial, I'm going to talk about how to make a palm tree. Now, I'm partially going to rely on some notes that are written by another faculty member, Sarah Farr. She did a great write-up on how to go through and create a palm tree, and I'll make those available to the class. One of the things I wanted to show is I've gone ahead and I've created textures. Now, I have other textures, other tutorials that are about how to create these sort of textures. Now what I have here is an opacity map. This is pure black and white. Anything that's white will show up, anything that's black will not. One thing that's different about this than other ones is this texture is broken up into a couple different sections, right? In many ways it's similar to my trim or strip textures that I have, where there's a series of elements that are mapped to specific areas. What we have here is a tiling bark. If I was to take this bark, you would see that it actually repeats based on this edge and this one. So, alright, so let's go here to 3ds Max. I have my material editor open. We're going to go ahead and make a multi-sub-object material, and it's going to have two materials in it. Alright, I'm going to plug these in 1 and 2, double click on it and change the number to 2. This first one I'm going to call A_bark, and then the second one I'm going to call B_fronds. Alright. Right click, layout children. Alright, so I'm just going to bring my textures in here. There's my opacity, and here's my base color. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to plug this into diffuse in both textures. But we're going to use the opacity only in the second one, the fronds. Right? And so this is something you often do where you want to utilize, if something has opacity in it, but it also has some, like part of a texture that doesn't, you end up having two different materials so that you're not dealing with the opacity on the parts that don't need it. So let's click here on the fronds, and just for working inside of 3ds Max, I'm going to click two-sided on that texture that has the fronds on it. Okay, just minimize that. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's start by making our palm tree. Alright, so I'm going to come here, create cylinder, and so we're going to make this 5 units in radius and 300 in height. And we're going to change our height segments to 16, but we're going to reduce our number of sides down to 8. Right? And then just with perspective active, I'm going to hit create. Right? So this is the main body of our tree. Okay? So I'm just going to call this trunk. Alright, now I need a plane. So let's get a plane out here. So click on plane. I'm still in perspective active. Keyboard entry. I'm going to go ahead and give this a length of 16 and a width of 64. And as far as the segments go, length segments, I'm going to set to 2, and width I'm going to put at 4. And I'm going to hit create on that. There we go. So this is going to be frond A. Alright, so I got my trunk, my frond A, and there we go. So now we're going to go ahead and copy that. And actually, so let's take this guy. So we made it with the 64. So let's just go ahead and move this up. I'm going to type in 32 here. There we go. Alright. And so on the main trunk, let's get our material editor open here. And I'm just going to right click and assign the parent here. Okay. I'm going to do that with the frond down there. Assign material. Okay. So now this guy, let's clone him as a copy. Call him frond B. Okay. And this one we're going to make 32 by 64, so he's a little bit wider. Okay. now let's move these guys over temporarily. I'm going to take all of them, right click, and say convert to edit poly. Now let's go through and select each one. Here's this trunk. I'm going to go into element. I'm going to click on it, and I just want to assign it all ID 1 because that's the one that doesn't have the opacity. And then these two down here, go into them one at a time. Let's go into element. That's going to be ID 2. Go into the second one, and that's going to be element ID 2 as well. There we go. All right. So now, because I have the multi-sub object assigned to them, later on when I attach them all together, I'm not going to run into any kind of weird problems with them. All right. So now we can go in and we can put an unwrap on them. So let's select this guy to unwrap Uvw. Open the UV editor. All right, so it automatically generates UVs. You'll find it always leaves them unwelded on one side, so I'll just select those and then just click weld selected. That fixes that up. And let's go ahead and grab the polygon on the bottom, and we'll just peel that, and we'll grab the one at the top, and we're just going to peel that one as well. There we go. So we got both those. For now, we'll just move them over to the side. All right, so let's get our palm texture in here. There it is. All right, so now we want to take this and we're going to adjust the size of this thing. So let's just move it over so that this back edge sits right here. And we're going to bring the whole thing over so that it comes right up to the edge there. Right. And so if we were to come over here and orbit around, we find where that edge is, right there, because we see where that green line is. So if we come over here to create, click over to the side, you can see it wraps around pretty well. Okay? So if we come back here, we can take a look at that. All right, so now it's, if we look, we see that it is very, very stretched out. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to right click and say convert to edit poly to make that permanent, kind of move that over. And now I can go into UVW Xform. Is an easy way for me to adjust my tiling. So if I want to tile my UVs more along the V-axis longer, I can just type in like 3. Now you can see it does a much better job of tiling it. All right. So it's just a question of how much we need to do it. Maybe 2.5. All right. Right click, convert to edit poly. Let's jump back into Unwrap Uvw one last time. Open the UV editor. And the last thing we want to do is just grab the top and the bottom, and let's just move, let's go to scale, scale them down, and just make sure they're sitting in that palm bark space. There we go. All right, let's convert that to edit poly. All right, now let's go through and let's fix our little fronds here. All right. So first thing I want to do, I'm going to grab their pivots. So I'm going to go to hierarchy, effect pivot only. And I want to move their pivots so that they're down here at, 0 on this axis. I want them sitting flush there. Turn that off. Okay. Now we'll go in here one at a time, unwrap UVW, open the UV editor. And it looks like we need to rotate it 90 degrees. So let's do that. There he is. And so this is palm frond A. So let's go ahead and get our base color in there. Let's grab our freeform and we'll just move this over to get that texture on there. There we go. So there's palm frond A. It looks like it's facing the wrong direction, so just got to rotate that around. There we go. Because we want its origin to be, to be right down here. Ideally, it's lined up. The center of it is lined up on that line. So let's just move this over. Actually, I'm just going to grab that edge and just move it so it lines up with that kind of little beam there. That's what we want. All right. Looking good. Alright, convert that to an edit poly, make that change permanent. And now let's go to the next one. One more time, Unwrap Uvw, open the UV editor, and now we should be able to take this whole thing and rotate it. There we go. We got the stem down at the bottom, and we'll do the same thing here where we're going to view our texture, and we should be able to, I'm just going to grab this edge and move it over, make sure that lines up right in the center, and then this edge we'll drag over so it's past the bark. Same with this edge, we'll grab him and move it over. There we go. Now we got our second palm frond in. Alright, so it's looking pretty good. Looks like maybe we might have a little bit of bark on this one. Let's go back in, Unwrap Uvw, open the UV editor. Now let's just make sure we'll go into edge, grab this edge, and just slide that in just a little bit away from the side. Convert that to poly. There we go. Alright, so now we have our different elements that we're going to use to make our texture here. Alright, so let's go ahead and we're going to start making some modifications to these stuff. Alright, so first off, this would be pretty boring if it was our palm tree. We want to make it a little bit more interesting. So let's throw a taper on there. There we go. And now we can start to adjust our values, right? Maybe we'll start to taper it in a little bit, flare it out some. Change that to -0.5. There we go. It's got a little bit of flare to it. Maybe we'll want to push that a little bit more. Oops. Yeah, we'll just leave it at those settings. The -0.5 and the 0.75. Alright. Does look a little thin. Why don't we do this? Let's come down here to Edit Poly, go to Element, grab the tree trunk. I'm going to turn on Show End Results. And I'm just going to go to Scale now. And it's important to see I'm doing this in the sub-object. We're just going to scale it along X and Y. There you go. You can see how the taper is affecting it a little bit differently. There we go. That looks a little bit more interesting. Turn that in a little bit more. Maybe not. Okay, cool. So that's looking pretty good. Alright, so now we're going to start working on our palm fronds. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to turn on edge faces, and let's grab these edges. Double click to select them both. I'm just going to raise those up a little bit. There we go. Alright, move my pivot down to the bottom, and now we'll put a little bit of a bend on it. So let's put a bend modifier. Alright, now we have a bend on there. And so now we can start to adjust that. So we're going to change this to bend along the X. There we go. And we can set this to 45. Alright, so now we got our frond. It's coming out. It's bending. Alright, so let's see. Next, we'll do that for the next piece as well that we have here. Do a similar thing. Where we'll come in here and grab our edges. Kind of raise those up. And now we'll put a bend modifier on it. Change it to X, adjust it to 45, and there we go. Right, so now we have these nice fronds that are coming down like that. So now from here what we can do is we can take these and we can start to move them around and arrange them. Right? And so if I took this and let's move this up to the top of our tree. Right? And so our tree is 300 units. We could just type in 300 and they'll move up to be sitting right there at the top. You can also move them to be at 0. Now they're both sitting on top of each other, which is not necessarily what we want. Let's grab frond A. There he is. And so him, we may want to just rotate him up a little bit more and bend him a little bit more. And let's take B and have him hang a little bit lower. Alright, so there we go. Now we got kind of the start of our fronds. And maybe since you can see you're going to start to get all this weird, things are going to start to draw a little weird, why don't we open up the material editor and expand this. I'm going to just remove the opacity for now because it'll make it draw nicer. All right. So one thing you do see when you start doing this work, you kind of run into, you know, the palms are kind of clipping through the trunk. You could potentially take the palm and move it out a little bit so it's not clipping as much. All right, do the same thing with this one. Just take it, kind of move it out a little bit. There we go. All right. Another thing we could do is if we take this guy, I'm going to rotate, we could say Tools, Array, and make sure you reset all your parameters. I'm here in the perspective view when I'm doing this. I'm going to turn on preview, and so if we rotate it along the z-axis, we could easily get our palm fronds out there. It's probably more than we need though, right? So let's drop this down to like 8. Let's take it down to 6. All right. And so if we take it down to 6, I think that's what, 45? No. How many we got here? Well, it's a lot right on top of themselves. That kind of looks good. So why don't we, oops, make sure keep preview on, and we'll just increase that so we got 8. All right, so I'm going to hit OK for that. And now this one, I may not want it to sit exactly at the same location. So why don't we rotate him just a tiny bit. This is kind of, what's the halfway point here? Let's turn on angle snap. That's good. -25. Yeah, we'll go with that. All right. So now I can take this same one here in perspective and do Tools, Array, and just hit OK, and it'll remember my previous settings. All right, there we go. So now I kind of have that row, and then I can take those same palm fronds there. Oops. And I'm going to go ahead and right click and clone this as a copy and say OK. And I'm just going to rotate him so he's sitting in between where the other one was. I'm just going to rotate it up a little bit more. And maybe, oops, reduce the amount. There we go. It's looking pretty good. And I can just say one more time, Tools, oops, Tools, Array. Okay. So here's kind of my, if I click in negative space, I think Max might be crashing on me, which would be very disappointing. So now I have more fronds out there. Ideally, it doesn't crash, and I can just save. I'm going to pause for a moment. Alright, so my machine did crash, so you're going to want to make sure you save and save often. Alright, so I was able to recover this through AutoBack. Make sure you're saving, like I said. So, alright, so now what I'm going to do here is, this is looking okay. I think I want to get another row of the big ones. So let's right click on him and clone him as a copy. Let's set our rotate to local axis. Rotate him up just a little bit. And then set it to view, because I want him to be kind of offset from some of these other ones. Let's say Tools, Array, Preview. And maybe instead of having 8 of these, we'll take it down to like 6. and we'll adjust how many are actually out there. You gotta make sure you keep your preview on. So let's put it at 7 and get it to come all the way around. So this guy is exactly in the same spot as the one next to him, and then we'll take it down to 6 and hit OK. There we go. Now we got a little bit more variety. This upper row, let's grab all of them. And maybe we'll just rotate them just a little bit. I'm on view when I rotate these. Okay, there we go. So if I click out here, there's my tree. And now I'm just going to come over here to right click, convert him to an edit poly. And under edit geometry, I'm going to hit attach. I'm just going to select everything and hit attach. All right, so I could call this palm underscore A. Now, what I could do is I can clone that. So let's clone that as a copy. Call that palm B. Hit OK. I'm just going to right click and say hide unselected. He's unique. All right. So let's go ahead and let's grab the base and put a FFD 4x4x4 on that. And now go into the control points. Let's make sure, let's switch over to a front view here. All right, hit Z to zoom out. Now let's just grab all these points. Just kind of move them. And what we're doing is we're going to make a second palm tree that's got a little bit more interesting shape to it. Come over to the side. Kind of rotate these. That'll help with the shape a little bit. Convert that to an edit poly, and then we can go into element and grab everything from the top here and just move this to center. And we could just move it and adjust it so that all these palm fronds of ours are kind of sitting on the top of our palm tree. And we could just zoom out, orbit around and rotate at that. All right. So let's go back, let's make this perspective. Top level, unhide all. All right, so we got our two palm trees. They are sitting in the same location. We need that for when we export them out for a game engine. If we open up the material editor and plug the opacity back in, it's going to look pretty bad, right? Because if we hit F4, the palms don't know how to sort properly. If you want to see them, there's this option here, render production. If you click on that, that should render it out. That'll sort the palms properly. At least it should. Yeah, I think it's having a hard time doing that. There we go. It's kind of starting to show them. It'll look a lot better once we get it into the game engine. All right. And so we'll be doing that very soon. So why don't we go ahead and select this and hit edit poly. So we got two edit polys on it. I'm going to copy this. Or actually before I do, I'm going to make a little folder here that I'm going to save them to. I'm going to copy the path of that. So say File, Export Selected. I'm just going to export that to my exports directory. Grab the next tree, edit poly, palm B, copy that, and same thing, File, Export Selected, palm B, save, and OK. All right. There we go. Now that's how we went through. We built our palm tree, and then we'll be able to see how that turns out when we bring that into our game engine to check it out and take a look at it. And you know, if we want, we could always go in here and adjust these. Right? If we want to make our palms bigger, we could always go in, grab scale, make sure it's on center, and just scale them up. Now they could be even bigger if we wanted, or if we want to kind of, we could even put an FFD on that entire group. Grab the control points. All right, if you want to make just one row there bigger, you can do that. Scale those out, because now that's all in there. Or just remove it. So, all right. there we go. It's making a palm tree.